shocking revelation. My daughter's mother-in-law ignored my plea and faced an unexpected price. Janet's heart sank as she walked into the bustling church hall, her hands clammy against the fabric of her dress. The familiar scent of coffee and cinnamon mingled with the undercurrent of small-town conversations, but all she could hear was the echoing laughter that felt worlds away. How could this be happening, she wondered, the swirl of emotions tightening in her chest. Her daughter, Emily, had just announced her engagement to Scott, a man winged from a world of polished suits and grand socialites. She instinctively felt the storm brewing behind the glamorous facade of Emily's future mother-in-law, Diane. Each step toward the gathering felt heavy, a tug of war within her heart. Wasn't Emily supposed to chase her artistic dreams, not chase the expectations of wealth? The color palette had always been Janet's refuge. Under the soft glow of moonlight, she'd lost herself in the delightful dance of paint, but associated it with a time long gone. Her heart, normally a resilient organ stitched together by years of caring for others, now battled against a tide of doubt. She felt like a Band-Aid over an ugly wound, trying to hold things together but knowing it could burst open at any moment. On the drive home, Janet's mind raced. Thoughts of Diane invading her daughter's mind felt like a plague, spreading disbelief and uncertainty. I'm a nurse. I save lives. I put people before profit. Her voice echoed in an empty car, muffled by the fear of insignificance in the face of corporate allure. What kind of future awaited Emily if her mother-in-law dismissed her artistic talent? The thought doused her in cold sweat, an overwhelming urge to shield her child from the clutches of materialism that felt like hands around her throat. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The reception unfolded with glistening chandeliers, clinking glasses, and laughter. Yet Janet felt as if she were a ghost in a haunted gallery, her heart thumping in resistance to the grandiosity around her. As Diane graced them with her presence, every gesture dripped with superiority. Her designer attire methodically argued against Janet's flourishing scars from night shifts spent under flickering fluorescent lights. Emergency nursing hardly seems glamorous, Diane remarked, a thin smile sharp enough to cut glass. The statement twisted deep into Janet's psyche, lacerating not just her, but Emily's dreams too. In that charged moment, Janet's resolve stirred like a dormant volcano. Lurking in her attic were brushes and paints, relics of an unfulfilled flame. The thought was reckless, exciting, and terrifying, a flickering candle flame in a windstorm of doubt. Suddenly, she saw herself standing in front of a canvas, revealing colors of passionate defiance. Yet as she considered this path, a cavernous emptiness rattled her. What would it mean to challenge Diane? Would it be enough to shield Emily? Only time would tell. What awaited on the horizon of their lives? Would Janet's memory of her own youthful dreams carry the weight to reshape what was lost? As the wedding day approached, Janet stood at a precipice, her heart pushing against the sharp cliffs of fear and chaos. The moment of truth loomed over her like a storm cloud. With Emily so enmeshed in this new world, Janet brushed the paint onto the canvas of her own life, ready for a confrontation looming closer with every heartbeat. What would happen in that moment of intervention? Would Diane finally understand what unconditional support meant? The weeks leading up to the wedding spun like a dizzying carousel, each day blurring past with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Janet's thoughts were no longer her own. They swirled around her daughter, the impending wedding, and the looming confrontation with Diane. She found solace in small acts of rebellion, sketching out ideas for paintings that had haunted her dreams for years. Each brushstroke against the empty canvas became a subtle declaration against Diane's ideals, a whisper of Janet's refusal to let Emily's creativity be suffocated under the weight of wealth. One afternoon, while rummaging through old boxes in the attic, Janet stumbled upon a faded portfolio filled with drawings from her art school days. Colors leaped from the paper, vibrant and alive with possibilities. Holding it close, she felt a flutter of hope beneath her worries. This was who she was, a creator, an artist. As she flipped through the pages, memories flooded back, the thrill of her first gallery showing, the warmth of the art community that embraced her talent. It had all slipped away, eclipsed by the practicalities of life, but now it stood before her, demanding to be acknowledged again. In the following days, Janet took a leap of faith. She signed up for a local art class, seeking not only a return to painting, but also an opportunity for personal growth. The community was hesitant, yet welcoming, filled with individuals who shared her struggles and aspirations. Each session transformed from a mere attendance into an exploration of deep-seated emotions, each stroke of the brush a dismissal of the shadow Diane cast over her family. The art teacher, a kindred spirit named Lisa, encouraged her to push boundaries, to explore vulnerability on the canvas. Through this, Janet discovered layers of herself that she had long buried. This newfound confidence began to seep into her interactions with Emily. On one particular evening, while they sat in the kitchen together, the scent of freshly baked cookies mingling with laughter, Janet carefully broached the subject of Emily's engagement and Diane's ambition for her life. "You know," she began cautiously, "it's okay to want something different than what others expect from you. It's your journey." Emily looked at her with wide eyes, the flicker of uncertainty mirrored in her mother's heart. It was a risk to challenge the impending social expectations, but Janet felt a flicker of resolve. "Mom, it's just so hard," Emily whispered, the weight of her situation evident as she described the pressure building from all sides. "Diane has this whole image of what I should be." Janet swallowed against the wave of protectiveness rising within her. "You don't have to fit into anyone's mold. Show them who you really are. Your art matters. Dreaming matters." She felt emboldened, using her own experience to connect with her daughter, hoping it would inspire Emily to embrace her own creative voice. But the seeds of doubt lingered around them, a shadow that neither could deny. Janet's feelings of inadequacy flared violently when Diane called to discuss wedding plans, the disdain in her voice palpable even through the phone. "Dear, if you're not careful, Emily might forget what's important, what really matters in life." Each word twisted in Janet's gut, the implications so clear. Janet's heart raced. The battle lines had been drawn once more. As the wedding day loomed closer, Janet's internal journey began to meld with her external confrontation. The palette of her life slowly refilled with colors. But could it be enough to counteract the monochrome expectations that seemed to choke both her and Emily? The day before the wedding dawned with an electric tension, each moment charged with the weight of possibilities. Tomorrow would not just be a ceremony, it would be a flashpoint, a moment where ambitions would be either affirmed or shattered. Janet stood before her easel one last time, paintbrush poised, and found herself thinking deeply about the battle ahead. What sacrifices would she have to make to protect Emily's dreams? Would she find the courage to stand firm against the powerful current that threatened to drown them both? Tomorrow would be the moment of reckoning, where her choices would guide the direction of their futures. The call from Diane had been just the first volley in what promised to be a grand clash of values. Somehow Janet knew a confrontation loomed, as inevitable as sunrise, and it was time to face it head-on. She took a deep breath, knowing the showdown with Diane, a battle between creativity and conformity, was just around the corner. With the sun painting a gradient of fiery hues across the horizon, Janet felt a swell of anxiety contrasting with a simmering resolve. She finished her last strokes on the canvas, a chaotic blend of colors that seemed to mirror her life's tumult. The night before the wedding prompted a surge of introspection, igniting within her a sense of urgency to solidify her newfound identity for both herself and Emily. As the candlelight flickered, shadows danced along the walls, evoking memories of past vulnerabilities and dreams deferred. Janet reflected on the fragility of her artistic pursuits, the facade of the conventional life she had built, and the intricate web Diane had woven around Emily's life. Would she allow that same web to ensnare the very essence of her daughter? The thought fueled a fire within her. She would not let Diane's harsh ideals dim Emily's light. Sleep eluded her that night, each tick of the clock a reminder of the confrontation awaiting her. The wedding was merely hours away, yet Janet's mind was not set on the festivities. It was on the clash she had anticipated, the moment of standing up for her daughter, of standing up for herself. She envisioned how the day would unfold, the attempts at polite conversation, the careful masking of tension beneath the surface smiles. But conflict would rise like the tide, and Janet would need to brace for the storm. In the early light, Janet dressed with an intensity she had not felt for years. As she fastened the delicate clasp of her necklace, she stared at her reflection. The woman gazing back was both familiar and foreign, a blend of the artist she longed to be and the mother she had grown into. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent vow to be the shield Emily needed, to wield her voice as both sword and shield against the suffocating expectations. With each step to the venue, a mixture of fear and determination propelled her forward. The grandeur around her, a spectacle of floral arrangements and shimmering lights, felt almost surreal. Yet, within the extravagance, Janet saw the stark reality of their lives, Diane's oppressive presence overshadowing each aspect of the celebration. As guests began to arrive, she spotted Diane across the room, bold in her distinct style, effortlessly commanding attention as she weaved through clusters of hushed conversation. Janet's heart raced. The final moments were upon her, and she could no longer retreat into the safety of shadows. With a steadying breath, she approached. "Diane," she said softly, firm yet cautious. The older woman turned, her sharp gaze assessing Janet with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Janet," Diane replied, her tone icy, "I hope you're ready for the ceremony. We wouldn't want to give your daughter a reason to doubt." The barb landed hard, yet Janet held her ground. "Emily needs room to explore who she truly is, not just who you want her to be. It's time we allowed her to breathe." The silence thickened, wrapping around them like a vice. Janet felt the weight of the words settle not just in Diane's expression, but in the air itself, an unyielding tension before a storm. "What a quaint thought, but you must understand, life is about choices, dear. A little guidance never hurt," Diane replied, her veneer of charm cracking. Janet felt the ground shift beneath her, a surge of heat filling her chest. The audience surrounding them began to chatter, their attention drawn to the unfolding tension. This was her moment, a flashpoint in their lives that could rip open old wounds or pave a new path forward. "Is that how you see it?" Janet challenged, finding strength in her voice. "Guidance can easily become oppression. You can't force a vibrant painting to be a monochrome design, Diane. Emily deserves better than that." As the tension hung palpably, she saw a flicker of surprise in Diane's eyes, then a sneer. This was not just a fight for Emily. It was a radical assertion of all Janet had fought to reclaim. The air hummed with impending consequences, and with her heart in her throat, Janet knew that whatever followed would redefine their family's dynamics. Janet took a step closer, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I will fight for Emily's right to create her own vision. She is not just a piece in your game." The room fell silent, and she sensed the weight of the moment settle heavily on her shoulders. What repercussions awaited her and Emily in the wake of this confrontation? The imminent fallout could either shatter their fragile existence or grant them a newfound freedom. As the first notes of the wedding march echoed, Janet braced herself for the tumultuous journey ahead. With the veil of uncertainty lifted, she felt the stirrings of hope rising alongside the dread, because in this battle, she understood that the fight for art, identity, and love was just beginning. "Tomorrow will not just be a ceremony," she whispered under her breath. "It will be a stand." The battle was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Janet's words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. The guest's silence felt like a wave crashing over her, and she braced herself for the storm that would inevitably follow. Time slowed as she locked eyes with Diane, a battle line drawn in the invisible ink of their years-long relationship. Around them, whispers surged, a soft but insistent tide eroding the surface decorum of the wedding. She could sense the eager curiosity behind the glances, the way people strained to hear every crack in the facade. For so long, she had played her part in maintaining the status quo. The thought of being the source of all this attention was both exhilarating and terrifying. "What do you think this is, Janet? A debate on art and identity?" Diane's voice sliced through the tension, dripping with condescension. "This is a wedding, and your theatrics are quite unbecoming." A fire ignited in Janet's core. "It's more than a wedding, Diane. It's about the lives we lead, Emily's life. If I am to be a part of this family, I will not allow you to dictate her existence." Each word felt like a stone flung into a quiet pond, rippling outward, disturbing the stagnant waters of their relationship. Diane's expression soured, her smile transformed into something sharp and predatory. "You're bold today, aren't you? But remember, decisions have implications. You really think you can change how we do things here?" The veiled threat lingered in the air as Janet fought to maintain her composure. She could almost hear the gears in Diane's mind turning, plotting the next move in this complex game. It's not about changing anything. It's about allowing Emily the freedom to grow into who she is meant to be. "I won't let you mold her into your ideal." Diane's lips pursed, her eyes hardening as if Janet had struck a nerve. "And what if she doesn't want that freedom? What if she prefers comfort and security over your idealistic nonsense? Are you so sure that your vision is the right one?" The insinuation was chilling, a direct challenge to her authority as a mother. "I know my daughter. I see her struggles. I see her joy. Her happiness is not measured by what you try to impose on her. I am not afraid of that." And with that assertion, Janet felt something shift, not just within her, but in the atmosphere around them. As if the universe had acknowledged her bravery, the very air tingled with possibility. Dismissing Diane's words as mere manipulation was her silent victory. For the first time, she grasped a sense of autonomy, a potent realization that came with defiance. Yet as clarity washed over her, a sense of dread began to creep back in. What would come next? She recalled the sacrifices she had made to ensure Emily never felt constrained, the times she had remained silent to avoid conflict. Now the consequences loomed like dark clouds ready to unleash a storm. "What will you do, Janet?" Diane's voice dropped to a whisper that only they could hear, laced with venom. "You've got the strength to confront me, but can you handle the repercussions?" Janet's heart thudded painfully against her ribcage. The reality loomed large, threatening to eclipse the courage she had mustered. The mere idea of losing her footing and facing Diane's wrath sent icy tendrils rattling through her. But standing there, she felt a strength she hadn't recognized before. "I am ready to face whatever comes," Janet replied, her voice unwavering. "For Emily, I will endure it all." As the wedding march crescendoed, drowning out their exchange, she realized that this moment was merely a prelude to the choices awaiting her. The impending fallout from her defiance would not just impact her relationship with Diane, but would ripple through her connection with Emily. The reality of her chosen courage throbbed in her veins. As the ceremony began, she felt both resolute and vulnerable, a paradox of hope and anxiety. She had set a course that could change their lives forever, but was she truly prepared for every implication it might carry? Amidst the joyous chaos surrounding them, A feeling of impending confrontation thrummed just beneath the surface. Staring at the scene unfolding, Janet knew that each future choice would unfold like brushstrokes on a canvas, and she was now both the artist and the art. As the vows began to weave together the lives of two people, Janet's thoughts raced ahead. What would be the first consequence of her stand? Would Emily feel the weight of freedom or an encroaching pressure to conform? The answers loomed just out of reach, but one thing was certain. The battle, both external and internal, was relentless. With every heartbeat, she sensed the world shifting underfoot, and the fight for her daughter's happiness had only just commenced. How would she navigate the aftermath? The question lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Janet's mind spun as the ceremony continued, her focus gradually drifting from the vows being exchanged to the faces surrounding her. The hum of whispered conversations became a backdrop to her thoughts. She felt their eyes on her, a mix of intrigue and judgment. As the couple exchanged rings, she understood that the world around her had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just an observer in her daughter's life. She was an active participant, stepping into a landscape rife with conflict. With each heartbeat, she recalled the echoes of her conversation with Diane, her resolve hardening even as anxiety threatened to reclaim its hold. This was a pivotal moment, not just for Emily, but for herself. She'd spent years tiptoeing around Diane, afraid of the consequences that came with dissent, but here she was, poised at the edge of a new reality, empowered by the courage she had always suppressed. As the incensed whispers subsided, a sense of detachment washed over her. The ceremony faded, and all Janet could feel was the impending storm, the confrontation with Diane waiting just beyond the floral archway. The vows being exchanged, once resonant with joy, felt like a distant melody, underscoring the discord in her heart. Would the commitment the couple shared clash with her own battles? She had to ask herself if she was truly equipped for this fight. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours, and as the newlyweds turned to face their guests, the applause that erupted snapped her back into the present. Janet clapped along with the crowd, a hollow gesture that masked her tightening chest. She noticed Diane through the throng, her expression composed, but her eyes seething with a quiet fury. The contrast was striking. While the couple basked in joy, Diane's looming presence seemed like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. When the festivities shifted to the reception, Janet slipped away from the crowd to seek a moment of clarity. The brimming joy around her clashed with her inner turmoil, and she wandered into a quiet corner, her thoughts racing. What would be her first move in this new chapter? Would she confront Diane head-on, risking a complete break, or take a strategic approach, preserving some semblance of peace for Emily's sake? That's when she realized the only way to navigate this turbulent landscape was to prepare herself emotionally and strategically. She needed to develop a plan not only for her confrontations with Diane, but also to understand Emily's perspective. Contemplating her daughter's feelings became paramount. Did Emily perceive her stand as rebellion or an act of love? Was she even aware of the stakes involved? Her resolve strengthened further as she recognized that standing up for her daughter meant cultivating an understanding of who Emily wanted to be. In that moment, she realized she could no longer be reactive. She needed to take direct control of her narrative. If she wanted to instill strength in Emily, she would need to model it first. Gathering her thoughts, Janet questioned her next steps. How could she best support her daughter in the wake of her confrontation with Diane? Perhaps a conversation with Emily, one where she could express her love and respect for her daughter's autonomy, was essential. This would not be about her own battle against Diane, but about empowering Emily to forge her own identity. With a newfound clarity coursing through her, Janet decided she would approach this carefully. She needed to be a lighthouse guiding Emily through the confusion rather than a storm tossed about by external chaos. But as the night wore on and the celebration continued, an unsettling realization dawned. She couldn't prepare Emily without first facing Diane directly. The next confrontation loomed large, threatening to eclipse the resolve she had only just begun to harness. Would Janet's newly found strength hold in the face of Diane's relentless scrutiny? As she rejoined the festivities, an undeniable urgency surged within her. She had to act, and soon, before the momentum built too high to control. As the laughter and music enveloped her like a blanket, she made her way back into the throng, knowing she was teetering on the brink of transformative action. The path ahead was fraught with conflict, but it was a necessity she could no longer shy away from. Now all she could do was hold on tight as the inevitable storm approached. Would she tackle Diane's animosity directly, or seek to undermine her in quieter, more calculated ways? The answer, she suspected, would impact more than just her relationship with Diane. It would resonate deeply into Emily's future. The pivotal moment was approaching, and within her heart, a flicker of apprehension ignited hope. How far was she willing to push back, and what would it cost her? The reception buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but Janet felt as if she were standing beneath an ominous cloud that threatened to unleash a deluge. The joy around her illuminated the stark shadows of her mounting dread. Diane remained at the periphery of her vision, a statue of tension and malice, and each laugh that rippled through the crowd was a taunt, reminding her of the battle brewing just beyond the floral arrangements. With every step back into the throng, Janet could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The plan she'd silently constructed in that corner now clamored in her mind, demanding attention and urgency. She would speak to Emily tonight. The time for cautious waiting had passed. A fleeting glance at the newlyweds highlighted the gulf between their bliss and the quagmire of her own relationships. Yet another pang of doubt lanced through her. How could she broach the subject of confronting Diane without scaring Emily into retreat? Would Emily misinterpret her intentions as an attempt to control or manipulate? Janet had no choice but to tread carefully, for the stakes were profoundly personal and painfully close to home. As the reception dinner wore on, Janet found herself inching closer to Diane. Every smile she forced felt like an admission of defeat. She could feel the air thickening again with unspoken tensions as she approached the small cluster of family that Diane commanded. She caught snippets of conversation, the happy couple, the future, the fleeting moments of laughter, but it was Diane's undertone that sliced through the atmosphere, wrapped in chilled mockery reserved only for Janet. "Isn't she brave?" Diane said, her voice just loud enough for Janet to catch the sarcasm. Trying to play the supportive mom while trying to worm her way back into the picture. Janet's heart raced as she fought the urge to respond immediately, her anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Instead, she inhaled deeply, forcing herself to respond with measured calm. This was her moment, the one she had considered in every anxious spiral of thought, and it would require grace and strategy. "Emily loves you," she began, steeling herself against the waves of hostility rolling off Diane. "You mean a lot to her. I want to be able to support you both without the complications." "Complications?" Diane echoed, her laughter harsh. "I can assure you, Janet, that your presence is the biggest complication of all." In that moment, Janet realized that her words might fall on deaf ears. Her resolve hardened. If she was to navigate this treacherous terrain, she had to see things from a new vantage point. Susan had spent so long in the shadow of Diane, respecting the status quo, while her true authority as a mother felt stifled. But now she understood the depth of her influence. It was an unyielding power born out of love, not obligation. "Maybe I don't need to fight this battle alone," Janet whispered to herself, feeling anew the surge of her maternal instinct. The world didn't need to view her as an adversary. She could also be an ally. Perhaps in the right moment, she would reveal herself as a mallet hammering away at Diane's relentless facade, breaking her hold over both her and Emily. She stepped back from the brewing confrontation, then turned, spotting Emily at the far side of the reception. The sound of laughter could not distract her from the certainty building within her. The decision she had to make next would redefine them all. a conversation rooted not in conflict, but in hope for understanding. Janet realized that the biggest question was not how she would tackle Diane, but how she would prepare Emily to shoulder the narrative of her own life without fear. With renewed purpose, she moved toward her daughter, a burning determination guiding her steps. They would talk, not just about Diane, but about identity and belonging. And by doing so, Janet hoped to unveil the latent strength within Emily that mirrored her own. As she approached, the music seemed to intensify, underscoring the gravity of the moment. But just as she was about to reach out, the room shifted, and Janet froze in disbelief. It wasn't just Diane who stood in her way. It was the realization that Emily was in deep conversation with someone who could change everything, a surprise guest with the power to ignite another storm. Could this disruption pull her daughter further away? Or would it be the catalyst for both of them to break free? The moment of truth approached with a chilling sense of urgency. An icy wave of disbelief washed over Janet as her eyes fell upon the figure standing confidently beside Emily. It was Peter, the very man who had unwittingly wrapped around Emily's heart, a man whose presence now shifted the atmosphere from tumultuous to chaotic. Janet's heart seized, the very conversation she had prepared, still simmering unarticulated in her mind, now overshadowed by the unforeseen challenge presented by Peter. As she closed the distance, Janet felt a mix of irritation and dread threading through her veins. Was this the distraction she had feared? Or perhaps, in an odd twist of fate, the key to unlocking the dialogue she desperately sought to initiate with Emily? As Peter laughed, his eyes glinting with delight as he gestured animatedly, Janet noted the way Emily's face illuminated, the joy stark against the backdrop of Diane's biting cynicism. Yet, Peter was not simply a charming friend. His very presence was yet another reminder of how far she had strayed from her daughter's world, a world she felt she barely understood. Could she truly reinsert herself into Emily's life while navigating the complexity of relationships now interwoven with this man? "Mom!" Emily's voice broke through Janet's spiral of doubt, pulling her from the depths of hesitation. "You remember Peter? He's been such a great support since—" The sentence hung tantalizingly in the air, a fragile thread connecting Janet's internal turmoil with her daughter's happiness. "Of course," Janet replied, summoning a smile that felt foreign on her face. "It's good to see you again, Peter." Her voice was steady, but internally, each word resonated with conflicting meanings. Was it genuine support, or were they walls she was constructing around her heart to shield against the turbulent storm that was Diane? The high-pitched laughter from across the room felt remote as Janet began to engage in the conversation, forcing her slipping confidence to take root. She carefully pivoted toward Emily, seeking to guide the talk gently back toward her, the heart of the conversation Janet craved. "Peter, I'm sure Emily has mentioned I'd love to hear more about how you two have been—" A quick sideways glance from Emily stalled Janet's momentum. Her daughter's expression, bright with friendship, turned desolate, almost as though she sensed Janet's every intention. The subtle reminder illuminated a painful truth. Emily likely didn't want to hear her mother's unfiltered concerns about Diane, or the layers of history that complicated their dynamics. "You should see the plans we've made," Peter interjected, turning the conversation to more immediate concerns, oblivious or uncaring about the tension simmering just beneath the surface. "Emily has fantastic ideas for the future. We're working on something that really excites her." That named excitement felt like an ember on Janet's heart, igniting an impulse. "What is it?" she asked, although part of her recoiled from the way the focus was now off the careful narrative she'd wished to introduce. Still, curiosity pulled her in. "Tell me more about it." As Peter spoke, Janet caught herself in a trap of admiration. His passion enveloped Emily, drawing out dreams that Janet had once held for herself and her daughter. Realizations hit her like a gust of wind. While she stood on the outside of this new world, the person she often perceived as an obstacle now palpably drew Emily into a future filled with possibilities. Mom? Emily's voice softened as Peter drifted into another jovial tale. Can we talk? Janet interrupted, the urgency spilling out before she could rein it in. The moment felt raw, almost desperate, as if all that was unsaid loomed larger than life. She couldn't afford to circle back to the cautious route any longer. Time hung thick in the air as Peter glanced between the two women, confusion flickering across his features. Maybe I should step away, he suggested, watching the undeniable current between mother and daughter veer towards the unsaid. No! Janet blurted, panic shooting through her. Wait! Emily's eyes flicked with uncertainty, but also with an understanding that sent a wordless message into Janet's psyche. You need to be brave. With trembling resolve, Janet forced herself to tread forward. No, Peter, stay. But now only her own willingness to push through the impending conversation echoed in her mind. The stage was set, a moment brief but profound. For better or worse, this was her chance to confront the deeper fears that tethered her and hold them, hopefully, in the light of Emily's burgeoning confidence. As Janet stood there, heart racing and thoughts swimming, she made a choice. To lay bare her truth, but time was running thin. One word from Peter could either shatter or fortify the fragile bridge back to her daughter. The moment was pregnant with possibilities, yet twisted with uncertainties. She was caught at the precipice of revelation and vulnerability. All she could do was take a breath and step into the unknown, hoping that what lay beyond the barrier would be the first stride toward reclaiming her place in Emily's life. But before the words could coalesce, the clinking of glasses signaled even greater interruptions looming ahead. Diane was on the move, and the stakes had suddenly become alarmingly high. Would this confrontation bolster their bond or challenge everything Janet believed she could rebuild? Janet's throat tightened as she processed Diane's confident approach. Every clink of her champagne flute fueled an instinctual dread that skittered through Janet's veins like ice water. This was her moment. The conversation with Emily was her opportunity to assert her role once more. Yet, the looming presence of Diane threatened to shatter that fragile resolve. Diane's sardonic smile twisted with the cockiness of someone who had always controlled the room. Well, isn't this a delightful little reunion? She chimed, her eyes darting between Janet and Emily, an implicit accusation lurking beneath her cheerful facade. Diane! The word escaped Janet's lips, narrowed and tense, but she felt an unfamiliar strength rising within her. It was not simply the anxiety of confronting Diane. It was the growing awareness of her own power to shape the narrative of her relationship with Emily. Diane might be a formidable opponent, but Janet had something invaluable, her determination to reconnect with her daughter. Oh, Janet, don't be so serious, Diane laughed, though the sound lacked genuine warmth. I just came over to see what my lovely daughter-in-law is up to. I wouldn't dream of interrupting the fun. Diane's ire wasn't veiled. It was painted with the bold brush of condescension, and in that moment, Janet felt the stakes escalate. She had to navigate this with care, recognizing that each word and gesture was being analyzed by both Emily and Peter. Actually, we were just about to discuss some of Emily's plans, Janet said, forcing a calm into her voice, a rhythm she managed despite the pounding heat of her own embarrassment. Maybe you could join us? The suggestion hung in the air, tension fraught like a bowstring, pulling taut. Emily's eyes flickered nervously between her mother and Diane. For a moment, Janet feared Diane's quick wit might undermine her intentions, but the glimmer in Peter's eyes suggested he was on her side, a subtle alignment that hinted he sensed the underlying conflict. Plans? How sweet, Diane remarked, her tone dripping with derision. Is it a new project, perhaps? Or are we just daydreaming about life goals together? To be honest, Emily said, looking increasingly anxious, I'm working on a community art exhibit. It's something I'm really passionate about. She spoke the words with hope, still the daughter Janet remembered, confident, creative, determined. The corner of Diane's mouth twitched in recognition, but her eyes remained stormy. Ah, the arts. Charming, But a little impractical, don't you think? I'm sure your college could use those fees on something more substantial. Her words sliced through the moment, extinguishing the brief spark of excitement. The plea for validation bubbled within Janet. This was unacceptable, the chance to see Emily transformed by her own dreams. And here was Diane, coiling around them like a constrictor. But to confront Diane directly would reveal her vulnerability, her doubts. She needed a strategy, a plan that would wrest the conversation back to a place where they could redefine the narrative together. Actually, I think Emily should pursue her passions, whatever they are, Janet interjected, her voice firm. It's important for her to explore what brings her joy, even if it doesn't fit into the mold, she added, holding Diane's gaze to draw the line. Could she articulate that enough to bolster Emily's confidence against Diane's tide? Emily caught her mother's eye, catching a flicker of understanding, even gratitude. It ignited something in Janet, a realization that this wasn't just about silencing Diane. It was about offering Emily the assurance that she believed in her potential as an artist, someone deserving of success on her terms. I appreciate that, Mom, Emily said softly, her voice gaining a thread of conviction. It's a cause worth supporting. The silence that followed felt charged, an unspoken acknowledgement forged between mother and daughter. Janet felt as if a dam had burst. She had embraced her fears and emerged tethered to Emily with renewed clarity. But the immediate victory was still shadowed by Diane's penetrating glare, a reminder that the battle was far from over. She could almost sense the winds of challenge shifting in Diane's mind, and even as victory tasted sweet, Janet knew there were storms ahead. "Let's see how long that enthusiasm lasts," Diane responded flippantly, subtly poking at the cracks in their moment. Janet drew in a breath, realizing she'd been peering abaft at her choices. Confrontation versus complacency. Diane never intended to let the stakes die down. As Diane casually walked off, Janet knew the tension had only relinquished its stranglehold temporarily. The conversation was far from complete, a mere prelude to deeper discussions about the role she needed to claim in Emily's life. Suddenly, Janet understood that she would need more than just courage. To rebuild her relationship, she needed to uncover her hidden talents, communication and emotional intelligence, each undervalued part of herself bursting with opportunity. But that revelation was a starting point, and she would have to summon strength to navigate the complexity that lay ahead. As she faced Emily, who was caught in her own conundrum, Janet felt the weight of expectation shift from fear to anticipation. "Let's talk more about your plans," Janet urged, stifling her own worries momentarily. A beat passed before she added, "Together, we'll make sure they succeed." What if she started a mentorship program, one she could launch alongside Emily's art exhibit? It would emphasize connection, empowerment. If only she could maintain that clarity, navigate the dual battle with Diane while standing steadfast in her new role. Little did Janet know, the real test of her strength was still dangling in the wings, waiting for its moment to take center stage. Would she face it with the resilience she'd begun to cultivate, or risk losing everything all over again? In the days that followed, the tension lingered like a storm cloud, ready to burst. Janet busied herself with plans to support Emily's exhibit, but found that the task was unexpectedly daunting. Every sketch Emily showed her awakened a cascade of pride mixed with fear, each swirling line a testament to the battles yet to come. Diane was a powerful adversary, cold and precise in her maneuvers. Janet had to confront her own inexperience in championing her daughter's dreams. In quiet moments at her kitchen table, Janet pored over notes she'd jotted down. They had been filled not only with plans, but also with reminders to herself. Every encouraging phrase about believing in Emily, rooted in the desire to reinforce their bond. But doubts crept in. Would her strategy hold? Could she truly become the advocate Emily needed? Her heart ached with the necessity of it, forcing her to confront not only Diane, but her own resistance to being a mother who had once stepped back too far. The following Saturday arrived, bringing a buzz of activity. Janet had organized a small gathering to promote Emily's art, inviting supportive friends and colleagues. This was her chance to transform anxiety into action. But as guests filtered in, Janet felt the weight of every exchanged pleasantry. Their conversations buzzed around her like bees, each word a reminder of how little she had been involved in her daughter's life until now. "Mom, I can't believe you were brave enough to arrange this." Emily beamed, her enthusiasm electrifying. "Thank you for believing in me." Janet's heart swelled, but the words she had rehearsed weighing her down restrained her. "I'm proud of you, Em. We should make this a monthly event, an exhibition club or something. Think of all the connections." "That could work," Emily replied, a fire igniting in her eyes. "It's the kind of exposure my work needs." Suddenly, the atmosphere felt alive, ready to unfreeze the boundaries that had lingered between them. The echo of the room swirled around Janet, wrapping her in shared dreams and aspirations until the door swung open. Diane strode in, her presence choking the vitality like a cloud over the sun. "Emily, dear, I hope you haven't set your hopes too high," Diane called, her voice dripping with the same venomous undertone. The art may as well have been a crumpled piece of paper from the way she dismissed it. Janet felt her fists clench at her sides. "Mother," Emily's voice wavered, "this is important to me." "Oh, I can see that. You've certainly gone all out. An exhibit promoting juvenile scribbles?" It was an attack, precise and stinging. A wave of silence fell over the room, all eyes now drawn to the conflict brewing. Janet inhaled deeply. This was her moment to put into practice everything she had reflected upon since their last encounter. "Diane," she interrupted sharply, squaring her shoulders, "Emily's art is a reflection of her growth and passion, and it deserves respect, not derision." The room pulsed with anticipation. It felt raw and electric. "What do you know about art, Janet? Stick to what you're good at," Diane shot back snidely, a triumphant smirk on her lips as if relishing in the chaos. Janet trembled but grounded herself. "I know enough to support my daughter's dreams. Maybe you should start considering the impact your words have on her." Emily looked between them, her expression a mix of surprise and admiration. The air shifted, charged with every unvoiced emotion, expectations, fears, and the burgeoning strength of a rekindled alliance. Would this confrontation mark a turning point, or would fear of failure sink them both? Maybe it was time for Diane to understand the stakes had changed, that Janet was no longer willing to be the backdrop to her daughter's life. But as Diane's gaze sharpened, Janet could feel the impending backlash. Did she have what it took? Janet faced the undeniable truth. She hadn't just thrown down a gauntlet. She had also opened the door to something profound within herself, beckoning deeper self-discovery. But soon, she sensed pieces of her plan unraveling. How far would she go to defend Emily's right to pursue her dreams against a mother-in-law determined to derail them? The answers would demand more than strategic thinking. They would call for the full spectrum of her strength. As Diane's eyes bore into her, Janet realized she might have initiated a war that would require every ounce of courage she had just begun to discover. And so the moments loomed, crucial choices stretching ahead of her like a maze, each turn another test. Would she be able to unite passion and protective fierceness? Or would defeat wait just around the corner, poised to remind her that the fight was only beginning? The reception remained tense, a fragile bubble of laughter and anticipation entrapped by the shadow of conflict. Janet stood firm, her heart racing as she faced Diane, who clearly relished entering the fray. This would not be another low-stakes exchange. It would define the new boundaries of her relationship with Emily. "Emily is not some canvas to be painted over with your judgments, Diane," Janet stated, her voice unwavering. "She's an artist, and it's time you recognized her right to explore that identity without your suffocating opinions." A ripple of gasps wafted through the crowd, marking her declaration as bold and unexpected. Janet could feel the energy shift. This was her moment of transformation, one she had long envisioned but had never dared to seize until now. Diane blinked, momentarily caught off guard, but her steely resolve quickly returned. You really think you can create a space for her to thrive when you've always been so ordinary, Janet? Each word dripped with disdain, but Janet's newfound courage felt impenetrable. Ordinary? I am a nurse. I care for lives every day, she responded passionately, her convictions radiating from her. Art is life. Emily's art is a part of her, and I refuse to let you diminish that. If you want her to succeed, you need to step aside and let her shine. Pressure to conform doesn't foster creativity, it stifles it. As Janet spoke, matting her fears into every syllable, she sensed the assembled guests straining to listen. The tension between mother and mother-in-law became almost palpable, and for the first time, Janet felt she was no longer standing alone in the battle for Emily's future. She had allies united not by obligation, but by mutual respect for Emily's journey. Emily watched intently, surprise etched across her face. The protective shield in her mother's voice fueled Janet's resolve like a wildfire. The words felt right, powerful, and long overdue. No longer cowering under Diane's presence, she recognized her own authority as a mother, a title she had feared losing in the whirlwind of wealth and expectations. Is that really your idea of success, Diane? For Emily to simply fit into the mold you fashioned? Janet pressed further, feeling bolstered by the moment. True success lies in the freedom to choose one's path, not in someone else's vision. Janet dared to glance at Emily, who was now brimming with a confidence she'd longed to see. With every word, she could feel the barriers of fear and doubt cracking under the weight of her assertion. And she knew this was a turning point, for her and for Emily too. Art is not about playing it safe, Janet continued resolutely. It's about daring to express who you are and embrace your individuality. I'm proud of Emily for pursuing her passion, and I'll stand by her no matter where it leads. That's what mothers do. We fight for our children's right to find their voice. Diane's face twisted, her facade of control flickering as her confidence met Janet's raw determination. Janet wished she could extend her hand to Diane, a gesture of understanding, but the woman felt like an impenetrable fortress. Perhaps someday they could reach a common ground, but today was not that day. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was punctuated by an audible intake of breath from the gathered guests. They began to murmur, some nodding in approval, others flashing unsure glances. And with that resonance of support, Janet felt an unexpected surge of warmth. Her words had made an impact. Perhaps it would ripple forward into a transformative tomorrow for both her and Emily. Finally, Diane regained her composure, her face hardening into familiar disdain. You're brave in your delusions, Janet, thinking you can guide the tide of expectations. She dismissed with a wave of her hand, but Janet stood taller, refusing to back down. Maybe it's time for a tide change, Diane. The words passed through Janet's lips with an ease she hadn't known she possessed. Turning to Emily, she searched for any flicker of doubt, but she found only steadfast resolve mirrored there. Together, we'll work toward your dreams, Em, no matter what that entails. Janet's heart swelled with pride as she embraced her daughter's courage alongside her own. As the guests began to engage in conversation again, reacquainting themselves with the festive atmosphere despite the confrontation, Janet felt like a phoenix rising from its ashes. She had firmly planted the seeds of empowerment and reclaimed her voice, not just for Emily, but for herself. She knew that this journey would not be easy, and Diane would not relent. Yet she faced this challenge with a profound new strength, bridging the remnants of their past with a vibrant future ahead. Over the next weeks, Janet weathered Diane's retaliatory attempts. From subtle jibes at family gatherings to attempting to lure Emily back into uniformity, Diane left no stone unturned. But heartened by newfound confidence, Janet stood firm, supporting Emily as she prepared for her debut art exhibition at a local gallery. The day arrived with a palpable excitement. Guests crowded the gallery, eloquently mingling under sparkling chandeliers, and as Emily's artwork lined the walls, Janet marveled at her transformation. Emily had painted a collection capturing the essence of identities, dreams, and the multitudes of life. Each piece radiated vulnerability and immense creativity, narrating stories untold. As the opening unfolded, Janet could sense the pride blooming not only within her, but in Emily and the community surrounding them. The right people had come together to celebrate artistry and expression, a dialogue Janet had feared Diane might extinguish, but had instead helped to nurture. When Emily wrapped her arms around Janet in a heartfelt embrace, that pride surged back. "Mom, I couldn't have done this without you," she murmured, tears glistening in her eyes. Janet felt a rush of vindication and joy, a requirement to articulate that this triumph was not entirely her own, but a beautifully collaborative endeavor. Together, they had crossed thresholds that had once seemed insurmountable. "And I realized something too, Em," Janet replied, the words tumbling freely. "I am not just your mother. I am also your biggest fan. Your art teaches me about courage every day. Let's keep inspiring each other." In that moment, as Janet looked into Emily's eyes, she knew that they were not just on pathways divided by Diane's encumbering expectations. They were artists in their own right, painting the landscapes of a shared destiny, one rich with autonomy, passion, and unyielding support. Janet had conquered her fears and reclaimed her identity, transforming not just herself, but also the dynamics between them. With newfound clarity, she stepped confidently into her role, ready to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, within her own life and, together, with Emily's burgeoning artistry. The future glimmered before them, an exquisite canvas painted with hope and undeniable strength, a perfect representation of a journey that had only just begun. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.